The moment you stop seeking validation from someone, you regain control over your emotions and energy. This is one of the most powerful shifts you can experience in your life. When you are attached to someone emotionally, especially after a breakup or rejection, your mind constantly seeks approval, closure, or recognition from that person. It's a natural reaction because human beings crave connection, and when that connection is suddenly disrupted, it creates a sense of loss, uncertainty, and even fear. The mistake most people make is that they allow this emotional attachment to dictate their actions, behaviors, and self-worth. They continue to chase, explain, and seek reassurance, believing that if they can just say the right thing or prove their value, the other person will see them differently. But this approach only pushes the person further away because neediness and desperation are repelling forces. The truth is, people are drawn to strength, confidence, and independence. The more you need someone to validate your worth, the more they sense that you are giving away your power. The moment you detach emotionally, everything changes. Detachment does not mean you stop caring, nor does it mean you suppress your emotions. It means you stop allowing someone else's actions or decisions to control your emotional state. It means recognizing that your value is not tied to their presence or absence in your life. This shift in mindset creates an undeniable change in your energy. Instead of radiating longing, sadness, or frustration, you begin to embody self-assurance, peace, and a quiet kind of power. People around you, especially the one who took you for granted, will feel this shift even if you never say a word. It's not about pretending or faking it. It's about genuinely arriving at a place where you realize you don't need them to be happy. Think about how the human mind works. We are wired to want what feels slightly out of reach. When something is always available, we don't value it as much. But when something becomes scarce or uncertain, it triggers a response in us to chase after it. This is why people often don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. When you detach and stop making them the center of your emotional world, they instinctively begin to notice. They may not immediately show it, but deep down, they start questioning. Why aren't they reaching out anymore? Why do they seem different? Did they meet someone new? Have they moved on? These questions create a sense of unease in their mind, and that unease often turns into curiosity, regret, or even panic. This is where most people unintentionally sabotage their progress. They start to see the signs of the other person noticing their absence, and they get tempted to break the silence. They reach out too soon, hoping for a reaction, thinking that now is the perfect time to remind them of what they lost. But in doing so, they give their power away again. The key is to remain detached, not as a tactic to manipulate, but because you genuinely have found peace within yourself. The most attractive thing in the world is someone who is not trying to prove their worth to anyone. When you stop needing them to see you, they can't help but start seeing you differently. Detachment also allows you to see things more clearly. When you're emotionally wrapped up in someone, you tend to overlook the red flags, the inconsistencies, and the ways in which they may not have been treating you with the respect and appreciation you deserved. But when you step back, when you stop reacting emotionally, you gain a new perspective. You start to recognize that maybe they weren't as perfect as you thought. Maybe you were chasing an illusion, an idea of what could have been rather than what actually was. This realization strengthens your resolve because you start to understand that your peace of mind is more important than trying to convince someone to choose you. As you continue on this path, something fascinating happens. You start attracting new opportunities, new people, and new experiences that align with the version of yourself that is no longer attached to the past. The energy that was once spent obsessing over what someone else was thinking or feeling is now being redirected into your own growth and evolution. You begin to glow differently. And that glow is impossible to ignore. The person who once dismissed you starts to feel the difference, and suddenly they are the ones wondering what happened. They may reach out. They may test the waters. They may try to find a way back into your life. But by then, you will have a choice. The power of detachment is not just about making them miss you. It's about reclaiming your own sense of self. It's about realizing that you never needed their approval in the first place. When you reach this level of emotional freedom, you become unstoppable. Nothing and no one has the power to control your happiness except you. People value what they think they are losing. This is a fundamental truth of human nature, deeply rooted in psychology and human behavior. When something is readily available, it is often taken for granted. It becomes predictable, expected, and even overlooked. But the moment it is no longer easily accessible, its perceived value increases dramatically. This is known as the law of scarcity, and it applies to relationships just as much as it does to material things. When you are always there, always reaching out, always trying to prove your worth, you become predictable. Predictability leads to complacency. And complacency leads to a lack of appreciation. The person on the receiving end begins to assume that no matter what they do, you will always be there, waiting, hoping, holding on. This belief causes them to put in less effort, to stop valuing what was once so important. But the moment you remove yourself, the moment they sense they might actually lose you for good, their entire perspective shifts. Scarcity triggers a deep psychological response. Think about how people react to limited time offers, rare collectibles, or even social trends. When something is suddenly difficult to obtain or appears to be slipping away, people scramble to get it. It's not always about genuine desire. It's about the fear of loss. This fear is one of the most powerful motivators in human psychology. When someone believes they might lose access to something or someone they once had, their mind goes into overdrive. Thoughts flood their consciousness. Why aren't they reaching out anymore? What changed? Did I underestimate them? Did I make a mistake? These questions begin to eat away at them, creating an internal conflict they never anticipated. This shift in perception is something that happens naturally when you pull back. It's not about playing games or manipulating emotions. It's about understanding that your presence itself has value. When you stop making yourself available at every turn, when you start focusing on your own life goals and happiness without seeking validation from them, they begin to feel the change. And the irony is, they don't feel this because you are telling them. You're not sending long messages. You're not pleading for attention. You're not announcing your absence. They feel it through the space you've created. The gap where your energy used to be now feels empty, and that emptiness forces them to acknowledge your worth. Most people make the mistake of trying too hard to prove they've moved on. They post about how happy they are. They make calculated moves to get attention. They indirectly try to show that they are thriving. But the problem with this approach is that it still centers the other person. It's still done with the hope of being noticed. True scarcity isn't about faking it. It's about genuinely shifting your focus away from them. The moment your energy is no longer directed toward them, that's when they feel the difference. The person who once had easy access to you suddenly realizes they can no longer predict your moves. You're no longer texting first, no longer answering instantly, no longer reacting to their breadcrumbs. This unpredictability creates tension in their mind. They start to recall the moments when you were there, the comfort of knowing you cared, and the security of believing you were always an option. But now that security is gone. Now, instead of assuming you'll always be available, they are left wondering if someone else has caught your attention. They question if you found something better, if you've realized your own worth, if they have lost the control they once had. This uncertainty is what makes them start chasing, not because they suddenly love you more, but because their ego and sense of control are being threatened. In relationships, people often only appreciate what they no longer have easy access to. The more someone believes you are always there, the less urgency they feel to keep you. But the second they feel they might lose you for good, their mind starts replaying every good memory, every moment of connection, and every reason they were once drawn to you. They begin to see you in a new light, not because you have changed who you are, but because the context has changed. The dynamic has shifted, and in that shift, they begin to question their own decisions. The power in this is that you don't have to do anything drastic. You don't need to send long messages explaining why you deserve better. You don't need to announce your departure. You simply shift your energy inward, focusing on your own growth, peace, and happiness. And in doing so, you create the very thing that makes them realize your value: distance. Distance creates scarcity, and scarcity forces people to reevaluate what they once took for granted. Emotional detachment is the most powerful tool you can use to regain control over your life. It is not about becoming cold or heartless, but rather about reclaiming your energy and refusing to let someone else dictate your emotions. When you are emotionally attached to someone, you give them power over you without even realizing it. Their actions, words, and decisions influence how you feel, how you think, and even how you see yourself. You find yourself reacting to everything they do, analyzing their messages, questioning their silences, feeling high when they show interest and low when they pull away. This emotional roller coaster drains your energy, leaving you feeling powerless, anxious, and stuck in a cycle of overthinking. But the moment you decide to detach emotionally, you shift the entire dynamic. You are no longer reacting to their every move. You are no longer sitting around wondering if they will text, call, or change their mind. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth to them. Instead, you begin to operate from a place of inner peace, where your happiness is no longer dependent on their validation. This change is subtle but powerful, and it is felt on an energetic level. The moment you stop seeking their approval, they begin to sense that something is different. They notice that you are no longer emotionally available in the same way, and that realization unsettles them. Human beings are wired to want what they feel slipping away. The moment they sense that they are losing access to you, they start to question things. They may have taken you for granted before because they believed you would always be there. But now something has changed. You are no longer giving them the same attention, the same emotional investment, or the same energy you once did. And that absence creates a void they were not prepared for. The person who once felt in control of the situation now feels uncertain, and that uncertainty makes them reconsider everything. But emotional detachment is not something you fake. It is not a temporary tactic to make them miss you. It is a deep internal shift where you genuinely no longer need them in the way you once did. You stop waiting for them to change. You stop hoping they will wake up one day and realize what they lost. You stop attaching your happiness to their presence or absence. Instead, you redirect all that energy inward into your own growth, your own healing, and your own journey. This is what makes emotional detachment so powerful. It frees you. Once you detach, you begin to see things clearly. You start to recognize the emotional patterns that kept you stuck. You see how much time and energy you spent trying to make them see your worth, when in reality, your worth was never something that needed to be proven. You realize that the only reason they had so much power over you was because you allowed them to. The love, care, and attention you gave them were never the problem. The problem was that you gave those things to someone who did not value them in the same way. And once that realization sinks in, you no longer feel the urge to chase, to explain, or to wait. Emotional detachment also allows you to reclaim your self-respect. When you are deeply attached to someone who does not reciprocate in the same way, you end up tolerating things that you normally wouldn't. You overlook red flags. You accept half-hearted efforts. You settled for breadcrumbs of attention, all because you fear losing them. But once you detach, you start to see things for what they really are. You no longer tolerate mistreatment. You no longer accept inconsistent behavior. You no longer settle for anything less than what you truly deserve. And that shift in mindset changes everything. At first, they may not notice. They may continue living their life as if nothing has changed. But over time, the shift becomes undeniable. The person who once held your emotions in the palm of their hand now realizes that they no longer have that control. They can no longer push and pull you at will. They can no longer expect you to be waiting. And that realization makes them uncomfortable. They start to feel the loss. Even if they never expected to, they start to wonder if they made a mistake. And that is when they try to pull you back in. They may reach out suddenly, acting as if nothing ever happened. They may test the waters with a simple message to see if they still have access to you. They may even start showing more interest, acting like they now see your value. But the truth is, they only feel the loss because you took your energy back. They are reacting to the absence of something they once had easy access to. And that is why emotional detachment is so powerful. It forces people to confront the reality of what they lost. But by the time they realize it, you have already moved forward. When you truly move on, you no longer feel the need to prove anything. You don't need to show them that you're happy, that you've changed, or that your life is better without them. You simply live your life. And in doing so, the energy shifts completely. There is no forced display of happiness, no carefully crafted image meant to make them regret their choices. Instead, your detachment and independence speak for themselves. This is where the real power lies. Not in trying to make someone see what they lost, but in genuinely no longer caring whether they see it or not. People can sense when they are no longer the center of your world. There's an unspoken energy that comes with detachment. The calls you once waited for no longer affect your day. The text messages that once determined your mood no longer hold any power over you. The questions that once ran through your mind, why haven't they reached out, or do they regret losing me, become irrelevant. You no longer seek closure because you have given it to yourself. And that's when they start to notice. They may not have paid much attention when you were still emotionally tied to them, but the moment you let go, they feel it. This shift is unsettling for them. When they walked away, they may have expected you to hold on, to wait, to keep the door open just in case they decided to come back. But now, that door is closed. They no longer have easy access to you, and that realization disrupts the sense of control they once had. They wonder why you're no longer reacting, why you seem unbothered, why you aren't chasing, questioning, or seeking answers. And this uncertainty makes them start searching for a way back in. The power dynamic has now flipped. When they left, they may have felt in control, believing they had the upper hand. But now, they're the ones experiencing doubt. They start second-guessing their decisions, questioning whether they made a mistake. They might reach out subtly, testing the waters to see if they can still get your attention. They might send a casual message, hoping to spark a conversation. They might even try to bring up old memories, hoping to reignite emotions that have long faded. But the difference now is that you see through it. You are no longer the person who would jump at any sign of interest. You no longer feel the urge to entertain their attempts at re-entering your life. And this is what makes them panic. They don't panic because they suddenly realize how much they love you. They panic because they no longer have the assurance that you are waiting. They panic because they no longer hold emotional power over you. They panic because for the first time, they are feeling the loss that you once felt. But by the time they realize this, you have already moved forward. You are no longer looking back. You are no longer available to be pulled back into the same cycle. Their regret is not your responsibility. Their sudden realization of your worth does not mean you need to give them another chance. The truth is, if they truly valued you, they would not have needed to lose you to see it. If they truly cared, they would not have waited until you were gone to try to win you back. The fact that it took your absence for them to realize your importance only proves that their motivation is not love, it is loss. It is the discomfort of losing control. It is the fear of no longer having the option they once thought they did. But by this point, you have outgrown the need to seek validation from them. You have built a life that is no longer centered around their presence or absence. You have created happiness on your own terms, and in doing so, you have done something far more powerful than making them miss you. You have freed yourself. You no longer seek their attention, their approval, or their regret. You have stepped into a new chapter, one where your happiness is no longer dependent on whether or not they realize what they lost. The moment you shift your focus away from them and fully invest in yourself, everything changes. You begin to see how much time, energy, and emotion you once poured into someone who was never supposed to be the center of your world. You start to recognize the power of self-investment, the value of redirecting all that energy into your own growth, your own happiness, and your own future. Instead of analyzing their every move, wondering if they will return or waiting for some form of validation, you take all of that energy and pour it back into yourself. And that is where the real transformation begins. Self-investment is not just about physical changes, though that is often the first thing people notice. It is about something much deeper. It is about rediscovering who you are outside of that relationship. When you spend so much time attached to another person, it is easy to lose yourself. You shape your days around their needs, your emotions around their actions, and your sense of worth around their approval. But the moment you shift that energy inward, you start to rebuild the parts of yourself that were neglected. You take back the pieces of yourself that you unknowingly gave away. This process is not easy. At first, it may feel unnatural. You have spent so long investing in them that focusing on yourself might feel selfish. But that is just the conditioning speaking. You were never meant to shrink yourself for the sake of another person. You were never meant to put someone else's happiness above your own. And once you start prioritizing yourself, you realize how much you were missing. You begin to set new goals. Not to impress them or to make them regret losing you, but simply because you deserve to have a life that excites you. You start working on your passions, the things that light a fire inside of you. You reconnect with old dreams that you may have set aside. You focus on your health, not to prove a point, but because you deserve to feel strong, confident, and alive. You surround yourself with people who uplift you rather than those who drain you. And something incredible happens when you do this. You no longer feel the need to prove anything to them. You are not trying to show them that you have moved on. You simply have. You are not trying to make them see your value. You already know it for yourself. And because of that, the energy shifts completely. They start to notice. They feel the absence of your attention, your energy, your presence. They wonder why you are no longer engaging, why you are no longer reacting, why you seem so content without them. And that realization unsettles them. When you were waiting for them, hoping they would return, they felt in control. They knew they had an emotional hold over you, but now that control is gone. You are no longer sitting around waiting for a message, a sign, or a second chance. You are out in the world, living your life, moving forward, and becoming the best version of yourself. That is something they never expected. They thought you would always be there, always available, always waiting. But now they see that you are not. They might try to re-enter your life, subtly at first, a random message, a like on social media, an attempt to spark a conversation, not because they have changed, but because they want to see if they still have access to you. But by this point, you see things clearly. You recognize that their sudden interest is not about love. It is about ego. It is about control. It is about the realization that they lost something valuable, something they took for granted. But that realization does not mean they deserve another chance. Your energy is different now. You no longer need their validation. You no longer crave their attention. You no longer feel the pull to go back to something that was never truly fulfilling. And that is what truly makes them panic. Not your absence, but your indifference. Not your silence, but your peace. Not your attempts to make them miss you, but the fact that you genuinely no longer care whether they do or not. When you truly understand your worth, you no longer settle for breadcrumbs. You no longer cling to the hope that someone will recognize your value after they have already disregarded it. You no longer wait for someone to return just to offer you the bare minimum. Instead, you establish a new standard for yourself, one that does not entertain half-hearted effort, empty apologies, or temporary attention. This shift is not just about rejecting someone from your past. It is about elevating the way you see yourself and the way you allow others to treat you. For so long, you may have accepted less than what you deserved. You may have tolerated inconsistency, allowed excuses, and made justifications for behavior that deep down you knew was unacceptable. Maybe you ignored red flags, convinced yourself that things would get better, or held on to the idea that if you just tried a little harder, they would finally treat you the way you wanted to be treated. But the truth is, the moment you have to force someone to see your worth is the moment they have already shown you that they never will. Realizing this is painful at first. It forces you to confront the fact that you are holding on to a fantasy, a version of someone that never truly existed. You were hoping they would change, waiting for them to finally appreciate you, believing that if they just had more time, they would come around. But that time never came because their actions had already spoken. And now, instead of waiting for an apology, instead of hoping for closure, you take control of your own narrative. You decide that you are no longer willing to wait for someone to give you what you are perfectly capable of giving yourself. Love, respect, and commitment. And this is what creates the ultimate shift. You are no longer available for people who treat you as an option. You no longer entertain conversations that leave you feeling empty. You no longer engage in situations that drain your energy. The space that was once filled with anxiety, uncertainty, and overthinking is now filled with peace. The mental and emotional energy that was once wasted on them is now being used to build yourself up. You are no longer reacting to their behavior. You are too busy creating a life that fulfills you. And that is what unsettles them the most. Not that you are gone, but that you are thriving without them. Not that you walked away, but that you never looked back. They expected you to struggle without them, to second guess your decision, to eventually cave and seek their attention again. But instead, they are faced with a version of you that no longer needs them, a version of you that no longer places them at the center of your world, a version of you that has outgrown them entirely. They might attempt to re-enter your life, testing to see if they still have access. They might reach out with a casual message, pretending nothing ever happened. They might bring up old memories, trying to spark nostalgia. They might even show signs of regret, hoping that you will give them another chance. But by now you see their behavior for what it is. Not genuine love, but an attempt to regain control. Because if they truly valued you, they would not have waited until you were gone to act like they cared. But now you are operating at a different frequency. You no longer seek closure from someone who never gave you clarity. You no longer look for answers from someone who never considered your feelings. You no longer give second chances to someone who only realized your worth when they lost access to you. The version of you that once tolerated inconsistency no longer exists. And that is what truly makes them panic. Not just the loss of you, but the loss of the power they once held over you. You no longer need to convince anyone to choose you. You no longer chase. You no longer prove. You no longer wait. Because now you understand that the right person will never put you in a position where you feel like you have to earn their love. The right person will see your worth without you having to beg for it. And until that person comes along, you are perfectly content standing alone, standing firm in your self-worth, and standing in a life that you have built for yourself, without waiting for validation from someone who never truly deserved you.